Sup Shredders, my name is Logan, aka Spiderhands, and welcome to an SP Reacts, where today we have ourselves a track from an act named Vague Pains Total Esprit de Scalier, and this is off the Memory album. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves a track on Bandcamp here, nice and big on the screen. Can it get bigger? It can. There we go, and we're going to listen through this track from start till finish, and we're going to hear what we think. So apparently this translated is titled The Spirit of the Staircase. Get that art up on the screen there, but let's go, let's do it. What do we got? I mean, it's luscious, isn't it? Great tone to the bass as well. It's nice to be able to hear that clearly. Interesting switch of time signature there as well. I mean, it's so full of life and vivacious, even with that bit of edge to the tone. I mean, it's interesting to sort of like, oh, and just finishing with 2 kicks. Nice, classy affair. It's interesting that we revolve around that. What do the French, what is the phrase, the French say, or that one that they have. We're going to have a quick look at the lyrics and then talk about this track more in the conclusion. Because we have the lyrics here on the page. I'll zoom in so you can see it. What's the phrase the French say for finding the right words too late? For re-rehearsing a scene that's already been played by refusing to part with concluded effects. The spirit is stairs. Okay, I kind of get it. I kind of get what this track is about. We're going to talk about it more in the conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named Vague Pains, titleless Esprit d'Escalier from the Memory album. Now, what do I think this track is about? I think it's talking about the term of phrase of the spirit of the stairs, l'esprit d'escalier. Re-rehearsing a scene that's already been played by refusing to part with concluded affairs. It's almost like you just continue dancing in that ballroom, sort of refusing to let go of what could have been or what, because it's easier to continue to imagine it doesn't exist anymore. It's almost like we're saying, no, seriously, you need to do what you can with me. We need to reach out to each other to actually end this so that we can move on. And I think that is an interesting thing to talk about here. Vocally, we have this very wistful performance there that in the background, it sounds very pretty and it's a very peaceful performance that has a little bit of sort of like a sort of ethereal feel to it. It's very gentle and relaxing, and it's easy to listen to, and there's a bit of vulnerability shown there. We hit the notes cleanly that we need to. It's a quiet performance. It doesn't try to stick out too much in the mix, and I think partially it's more effective because of that. I think that in addition to this, what I like is that we allowed the music to be so much of the flavor of this track, almost like we were overwhelmed by that feeling as opposed to the music, the story needing to be spoon-fed through those parts. I think that was clever. So there was the atmosphere that was created that actually made the vocals in their relative quietness and their sort of like how sort of niched in there and amalgamated. That's part of what made it work. I mean, it's not like there were times when the dynamic range, like this track became quieter and parts where we simply had the bass or the drums. But in those chorus sections where things sort of exploded with sound and color, that was when they sort of became more of the mist, the ambience. I think part of what makes this track work so well are the seamless transitions between parts of the song there, as well as the instrumental layering, the chord choices and melodies infused, as well as the interesting rhythms on stuff like the bass and the drums. You have this sort of uncomfortable intro at the beginning with that almost sort of synth brushes kind of feel there, going into a kind of uncomfortable key melodic progression there. It almost seems like we're trying to sort of step away from it. It seems like something we're trying to get away from, which is an interesting thing considering the subject of the song. But the way that we kind of walk away from that phasing element there, the sound design with all these interesting sort of mildly uncomfortable individual components, to move into a drum beat there that capitalizes on that 8th and 16th groove there, the ability to sort of like make the most of that space within the composition without percussion beforehand. For some of those guitar melodies there, those arpeggios or those note choices to kind of ground the key signature to contrast against the ambiguity tonally before is just really cool. And you just get this fantastic slow burn of these increased sort of reverb delay tabs with this kind of fuzzy distortion there. Like it wafts into the headphones. It's so beautiful. And again, with that focus on the fullness of the frequency spectrum, things being niched well, both from an arrangement and post-production perspective, you just have a massively full sounding track that is even more powerful, ironically, when there is less. It takes it away. You're focusing on that extra context within those verses. There's great contrast dynamically. And even then, there are these really interesting synth or key patterns there where the attack's been taken away. They just kind of float and sort of resonate there. There are all these sparkly components which are an octave or two above where that bass line is, and they just kind of sit and linger there. And it's very kind of starry-eyed, almost like you're listening to music at night, even when it's the middle of the day. And I like when the vocals go up in their range. I didn't mention this before, but we're very comfortable with whichever part of us had a head and chest voice we're in. And it's a very sort of like convincing performance there without overdoing it. But it's that we allow the music to go up and down with the vocals to give it space when it needs to, and also to allow it to be its own thing. And even though we have 2 to 3 main sections structurally, we just have those constant adjustments, like, again, whether they be different synth pad or sort of late leads or something soft or ambience parts there. Maybe we have like modulated parts against like the synth strings that we had at the start there, the low kind of clicks or plucks there outside of the main sort of guitar, bass, and drum and key elements there. We're creating a soundscape. And there's this overwhelming sort of sense of relative peace to it. Like there's no harsh edges despite the distortion within those reverb soaked layers. And it's mesmerizing in that effect. You know, you're awash in that. It's the fact that things are panned so that the music surrounds you in the headphones. And it's that, you know, these major or minor components, even if there are extensions, they're not too obvious. With those extensions, you do typically still kind of revolve around those majors or minors to communicate the mood, whilst not wanting to overcommit with the final note that it resolves to. I like the variety of different drum fills and various kind of bits and pieces as well. We have movements that go from, you know, tom-oriented floor and high tom parts there, working with different 8th and 16ths there, to being fully confident with the snares, kicks, and different hi-hat and sort of cymbal patterns there. We just explore the drum kit within this. And with the bass being so sort of locked into hovering around those root notes, and typically more of a sort of like a tremolo pit, kind of like a really fast rhythm, but because of the main grooves with the drums there, they niche without it seeming too fast. But yeah, a lot of the color comes from like a lot of those lead lines as well on the guitar, sounding so vivacious and full of life. Either more sort of like innocent when it's clean, and a bit more kind of like sassed, but not too much when they're kind of pushed. But as a closing comment on the actual instrumentation itself, I think that one of my favorite parts is how you integrate the synths with those guitars, with the fuzziness of those guitars there, for the synths to kind of meld and flesh into that, to kind of have a sense of a real sort of glow to it, kind of highlights thematically just how much we want this to sort of really be a beautiful experience with this track. It's almost like the spirit that we're mourning, our inability to move on despite this. We're not trying to be too sort of like dire about it. It's almost like almost a beautiful melancholy or bittersweet situation. We're trying to focus on how the pure unadulterated feelings we experience through that. And there is a bit of romanticism through how kind of like kind it is. But I think, just from a listener's perspective, it kind of makes these kind of subject matters a little bit easier to deal with. You know, like a lot of music will be on the nose and like, this is not a great situation to be in, etc. But this is almost trying to sort of soothe you with it, like just trying to relate and offer you a nice sort of cozy blanket to get snugged up in. So I think chord-wise, you know, rhythm-wise, even though there were a lot of different rhythm patterns on the kit, they're not sort of like sharp with their playing. I just feel like there's a great equilibrium between the performance and the vocals and the lyrics, story, subject matter. The recording, mixing, and mastering, the studio production is tight. I'm really happy with the way everything was captured there. Again, like a lot of the power from this kind of music comes from like how sort of almost vague it is, without there being any sort of like hard sort of consonants, whether through the vocal parts. The guitars, even if there are some harsher textures, they're softened by the effects change on them, making it a bit sort of like more misty. The drums and bass kind of being niched and locked into there. It's just very kind of like smooth, it's just a very kind of chilled out vibe to it. And part of that is because of the smoothness of the gluing of stuff in regards to the dynamic range, just allowing the instrumental layers to come off to keep there being a sense of sort of difference there. It's still being nice and loud without pumping. Part of that due to how things are filled up in the frequency spectrum with stuff building up in that amount, the filtering, the way things are modulated and kind of like moved around there. It's really professional. I'm glad I had the opportunity to review more of their music, and effectively, this is my review of this track from an act named Vague Pains, titled Esprit d'Escalier, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please do go show them some love via their various social medias and their Bandcamp page. And stay cool and stay safe. And please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as need the help more than ever with all the great stuff going on in the world. And I'll catch you in the next SP Reacts. Spiderhands out.